These are two of the most frightening creatures from mythology. They're both known for their ability to terrify anyone that enters their domain, and they both have a serious score to settle. It's time for the ultimate showdown between two monsters of legend. Welcome to our channel, where today we ask the question: who would win in a fight between the Sphinx and the Minotaur? The Sphinx is often depicted as a winged creature with the body of a lion, eagle's wings, and the face of a woman. However, this image is actually a blend of images from Egyptian, Greek, and Roman mythology. In Greek mythology, the Sphinx was much more animalistic, taking the form of a creature with the head of a woman and the body of a large female lion. The Sphinx's name may come from the Greek word Cephion, meaning purse or bag. And like a purse, the Sphinx could hold many secrets. In Greek mythology, the Sphinx lived near the city of Thebes and spent her time terrorizing the citizens by snatching unsuspecting travelers off the road and devouring them. She only took a break from eating people when she needed to lay eggs, which she did every 3 years. There was some big differences between this version of the Sphinx and the creature from Egyptian mythology. For example, the Egyptian Sphinx wasn't evil and didn't eat people. Instead, it was a creature that protected the pharaohs and helped them communicate with the gods. Another difference was that the Egyptian Sphinx had a male body and a human face instead of a female lion's body and a female human face. Regardless, the Sphinx is one of the most enduring creatures in mythology and has inspired countless works of art, literature, and film. Now let's take a look at the Minotaur. As you may have already guessed, the Minotaur was a creature with the head of a bull and the body of a man. He was the son of Queen Pasiphae and the god Poseidon, and he was born after Poseidon got angry at Minos, the king of Crete, and made him break his promise. The Minotaur was a huge beast, and he was so strong that he needed to be locked up in a labyrinth under the sea. The labyrinth was designed by the architect Daedalus, and it was so confusing that even the most intelligent person could easily get lost inside. The Minotaur spent most of his time in the labyrinth, but he would sometimes escape and go on a rampage, killing anyone who got in his way. This was obviously a problem, and King Minos eventually decided that the only way to stop the Minotaur was to sacrifice him. He built a huge stone chamber and then filled it with honey and wine. The smell was so sweet that it lured the Minotaur inside, and then the stones closed up, trapping him forever. As far as mythical beasts go, the Sphinx and the Minotaur have a lot in common. They're both half human and half animal, and they both have a history of violence. But despite these similarities, these two creatures couldn't be more different. The Sphinx was an independent hunter, while the Minotaur was trapped in a labyrinth. The Sphinx was a master of disguise, while the Minotaur was a brute force. So how would these two very different creatures fare if they were to face off against each other? Let's find out. First, we need to figure out what weapons, if any, each creature would bring to the fight. Since the Sphinx was a wild animal, she wouldn't be bringing anything to the fight other than her natural weapons, which would include her sharp claws and teeth. The same was true of the Minotaur. On top of his sharp hooves and horns, the Minotaur also brought his incredible strength and stamina to the fight. His sheer size and power would make him a formidable opponent for the Sphinx, but the Sphinx had a few tricks up her sleeve that the Minotaur couldn't hope to match. For starters, she was much more agile than the Minotaur thanks to her wings. She could swoop down and attack him from above or escape if things started to go south. The Minotaur, on the other hand, was stuck on the ground and had no way to defend himself against aerial attacks. The Sphinx could also use her intelligence to her advantage. She could fly around the Minotaur and study his movements, looking for weaknesses that she could exploit. Plus, she knew all of the best hiding places in the labyrinth, so she could always escape if she needed to regroup. Finally, the Sphinx had something else up her sleeve that would prove to be the Minotaur's undoing. Her riddles. Yeah, that's right. The Sphinx was a master of riddles, and she used them to defeat anyone who entered the labyrinth. She would pose a riddle to the unsuspecting traveler, and if they couldn't answer it, she would eat them. Now, you might be thinking that this is a pretty cheap trick, but don't forget that the Sphinx was a wild animal, and she had no qualms about killing people. Plus, her riddles were notoriously difficult, even for the smartest people, so there's no shame in losing against such a worthy opponent. So how do you decide a winner in this scenario? Well, there's only one way. We need to put these two creatures into a fighting game. The first move of the fight goes to the Minotaur. He charges straight toward the Sphinx with his horns held high. If he connects, it's lights out for the Sphinx. But the Minotaur is big and slow, and the Sphinx is able to dodge his attack with ease. The Minotaur stumbles forward, but the Sphinx isn't about to make the same mistake twice. She swoops down and tries to tear out the Minotaur's eyes. The Minotaur roars in pain and anger and swipes back with his massive hooves. The Sphinx is forced to fly backward to avoid being crushed. The Minotaur charges again, but the Sphinx is ready for him. She dives down and sinks her claws into the Minotaur's flank. The Minotaur screams as blood pours out of the wound, but the Sphinx isn't done yet. She takes to the air and begins circling the Minotaur, raking him with her claws each time she passes. The Minotaur is exhausted and winded, and he can't do anything to stop the Sphinx's relentless attacks. She lands on his back and sinks her teeth into his neck. The Minotaur falls to his knees and then collapses to the ground. The Sphinx stands over him and lets out a victorious screech. The winner of this fight is the Sphinx. Now that we know who would win in a fight between the Sphinx and the Minotaur, it's time to turn the tables and explore what a battle between these two legendary creatures would look like. How would they go about defeating each other? What strategies would they use to come out on top? Let's start by looking at how each creature would try to defeat the other. The Sphinx, as we saw in the last section, is a very patient hunter. She would likely spend a lot of time observing the Minotaur before trying to attack. She wants to know his strengths and weaknesses so that she can exploit them. The Minotaur, on the other hand, is a much more aggressive fighter. He's going to try to charge the Sphinx and use his horns to gore her out of the sky. Of course, this is easier said than done. The Sphinx is a very elusive target and her wings will make it difficult for the Minotaur to hit her. But the Minotaur is a bull and bulls are known for their horns. Eventually, the Minotaur is going to connect and knock the Sphinx out of the sky. Once she's on the ground, the Minotaur is going to follow up with a vicious stomp to try and crush her, but the Sphinx is too quick for the Minotaur and she's able to dodge his attack. She gets back up and flies away, taunting the Minotaur as she goes. This is really starting to frustrate the Minotaur now, and his anger is getting the better of him. He charges after the Sphinx, but he's moving so fast that he loses control and ends up smashing into a wall. The Sphinx laughs at him and the Minotaur is furious. He's never been humiliated like this before. He shakes his head to clear the cobwebs and charges again, but this time he's more careful. He knows that he can't afford to make another mistake. The Minotaur catches up to the Sphinx and the two creatures engage in a fierce battle. The Sphinx uses her claws and teeth to slash and bite the Minotaur while he tries to impale her with his horns. The fight is evenly matched and neither creature is able to gain the upper hand. It's time to bring in the cavalry. As the battle rages on, the king of the Labyrinth realizes that he needs to get involved. He sends in some of his best soldiers to try and capture the Sphinx, but she's too quick for them and she's able to evade their grasp. The king of the Labyrinth is getting worried now. If the Sphinx defeats the Minotaur, then his entire kingdom is in danger. He knows that he has to do something to stop her. The king of the Labyrinth has an idea. He goes to the palace and summons the greatest inventor in the kingdom. Together they come up with a plan to defeat the Sphinx. The inventor creates a suit of armor that is designed to catch the Sphinx off guard. It looks like a huge beehive, and the plan is to place it near the labyrinth. The king of the labyrinth agrees to lure the Sphinx into a trap. The plan is set in motion. The king of the labyrinth leads the Sphinx away from the battle and towards the beehive. The Sphinx is distracted and doesn't notice the trap until it's too late. The bees swarm over her and sting her repeatedly. The Sphinx screams in pain and tries to swat them away, but it's no use. The bees are relentless, and soon she's completely paralyzed. The king of the labyrinth steps forward and strikes the Sphinx down, ending her reign of terror once and for all. With the Sphinx defeated, the Minotaur is free to roam the labyrinth as he pleases. But the victory is short-lived. Soon after, the king of the labyrinth discovers that the Minotaur has been using his newfound freedom to terrorize the citizens. He's destroying homes, killing livestock, and generally making life miserable for everyone. The king of the labyrinth has no choice but to take action. He confronts the Minotaur and demands that he stop his rampage. But the Minotaur is too powerful and he simply ignores the king's demands. The king of the labyrinth is left with no choice but to kill the Minotaur. The battle is long and bloody, but in the end, the king of the labyrinth is victorious. He cuts off the Minotaur's head and throws it into the sea. With the Minotaur dead, the labyrinth is finally safe. The story of the Sphinx and the Minotaur is a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power. The Sphinx represents wisdom and knowledge, but when she becomes too arrogant, she is brought down by those she considers beneath her. The Minotaur represents raw power and aggression, but without control or purpose. That power turns destructive and ultimately leads to his downfall. Both creatures are ultimately victims of their own hubris, but they also teach us that no matter how powerful or intelligent we are, we must always remain humble and strive to use our abilities for good. Hey, thanks for watching.